Jambo Rafiki. My name is Elizabeth from Kasiwa82, and I hope you are doing really well. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back. I release 2 videos a week. On Tuesdays, I talk about all things books, and on Fridays, I talk about journaling and all things creative play. Happy Groundhog Day! So in honor of Groundhog Day and as an ode to Groundhog Day the movie, I'm going to make a video about books that are kinda Groundhog Day read-alikes. So what does that mean? If you think about Groundhog Day the movie, it specifically is about a character who's stuck in time, in a time loop. Every day he goes to bed, he wakes up in the morning, and it's the same day. In his case, it's Groundhog Day, right? So what I wanted to do was explore books that talk about time loops, and I have 5 books to talk about today. So 2 of these I have already read and would recommend, and the other 3 are on my TBR. So I'd be curious as to what your thoughts would be on the 3 I have not read. So let's go ahead and talk about Groundhog Day read-alike. So 5 books that talk about time loops. The first one I have for you is by Stephen King. How can I not talk about King? So his book 11/22/63 is a time loop. So the premise of the story is you've got this guy, Jake Epping. He's a teacher in a high school English teacher in Maine. And so one day, Al, who's the guy who owns a diner, tells him that there is this portal in the storage room of the diner that will basically take you back in time. So what Jake Epping does is he gets through the portal, and what ends up happening is he ends up in the United States on, let me take a look at my notes here, September 9th, 1958. Now, here's what I think is really interesting. When we talk about time loops or anything that helps us or allows us to go back in time, the idea is that we will always do things better. Who hasn't had things that they wish they had done differently? And so the myth I think we all have is if we were to go back in time, we would do things differently, we would fix our errors, we would have the right comeback, we would not make that mistake. And the question always is, do we really think that's what would happen? Or would we basically just make different kinds of mistakes? So in the premise of this book, what I really like about 11/22/63 is that King does not try to explain the time loop. He doesn't try to explain that portal. All he says is, wave magic wand and there's a portal that you can basically go back in time. Now, the goal of this particular story is Jake's mission, if you will, is to go back in time and prevent the JFK assassination. So there's a lot of us to talk about. There's a lot of books and conversations about the JFK assassination and how the United States might have gone a completely different trajectory if not for his assassination, as well as Martin Luther King and his brother that happens around the same time frame, right? So the idea is to make us a better country, to give America a better future. Jake's going to go back in time and prevent that assassination from taking place. Now here's the caveat. The way this portal works, he goes back in time to the same place, the same time, the same day. So September 9th, 1958 is when he lands in that particular time back in the United States, right? So he's got some time to quote unquote kill before he tries to prevent the JFK assassination. So what happens is we go through this loop because Jake now knows he can do that. He comes back into the present day and then goes back as he tries to solve different kinds of problems. And it's the exploration of what does life look like if you go back and you have to spend several years while you're waiting for this event that you can basically solve or think you can solve. And there's an exploration of the characters that he meets and just what life was like, right? It's kind of a different era in the US kind of cultural norms of the time. I think King does a really good job of setting you in time and place, as well as what he's really good at, which is character development. Now, the one thing I will say is, given how slow, and this is a pretty thick book, but it goes really fast. The one thing I will say is at the ending, the book seems to move at a very leisurely pace, and then we come to the ending and things happen bam, bam, bam. And it almost feels like that ending was a little too rushed given the pace at which the rest of the book unfolds. Highly recommend this one. I think it's actually a really fun look at what, if you were going back to fix a particular problem or solve a particular problem, what could you do? Now, again, there's always this caveat in this particular character's case. He knows that if things don't go the way he wants it to, he can always come back and restart. But there's a lot of years that you have to restart. And the question is, if you go back in time and the life you have in that previous time is actually more fulfilling for you than the life you have in your current time frame, would you come back? Highly recommend this one. Second on the list, Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. Now, this one is a different premise, totally different than the King one, but it's similar in the fact that there's a time loop and the author does not bother to explain how this happens. So in 1910 in England, there is a girl born, her name is Ursula Todd. She's born, she does not breathe, and she dies. In 1910, on the exact same day, the exact same time, Ursula Todd is born. She takes her breaths, and then we go on from there. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is this character is born in the same place, in the same time, to the same parents, to the same family, and she dies again and again and again, and then we reboot right back to the day that she was originally born in 1910. A couple of things that does. One is, I don't think I've ever read a book where I was so excited about waiting for the main character to die, because one, she dies in some pretty interesting ways. There's a cat involved in one of these deaths. And then two is that she has this sense of deja vu every time she comes back to that path. So when in a previous lifetime, when we see something not work out really well, when she comes to that same point in time in the next timeline, or the next lifeline, if you will, she's able to do something slightly differently that will change the trajectory of her life going forward. But she continues to die, so she's continually going through this reboot, if you will. The thing I think is really interesting here is it's set in historical fiction, right? So I think the author is really great in setting the story between the World War, or during the World War. So we go through World War I and World War II, which were huge upheavals both politically and socially. And I think placing a character in that time frame and having her loop back through that time period is actually really wonderful. I love the storytelling, the writing is really good, and also I really love the family. The family Ursula belongs to and the dynamics of that family, it's just fantastic. I highly recommend this one. So the first two, 11/22/63 by Stephen King and Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, are both books I have read and I would highly recommend. Now the next three I'm going to talk about are ones I have not read, but as I was kind of taking a quick look to see, time loops, I know there's got to be more stories about that. So let me take a look. These are some of the ones that came up that really sound interesting to me. And I'd be curious if you've read them and what you thought about them. So number 3 is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Now, I have read his newest book, but I have not read this one. And I mean, the pitch is it's Agatha Christie meets Groundhog Day. Boy, that sounds great to me. It sounds like, based on the premise of the book I read, that it's a locked manor historical mystery, that it's set in the 1920s. Now, the unusual thing about this story, which I find very intriguing, is the main character, Evelyn Hardcastle, dies. And there is this person who is trying to solve her death in this locked manor setting. And what is unusual is that every time this character wakes up, he wakes up in a different body. I mean, that just sounds really great. So he's in a different body, which means he's in different genders as well. But then he falls asleep, I'm assuming, and then he wakes up the next day in a different body. So the story, I'm assuming, unfolds from all these different POVs because this character is basically body swapping. It just sounds really great, and I'm going to be moving this up my TBR. Number 4 is The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. Now, Claire North, I read her trilogy. She's got a novella trilogy that I absolutely loved. And I'm not sure, again, why when I find authors I love, somehow we just never get back to reading them. We're always, distracted by the new shiny books out there. But this is one I'm also going to move up my TBR because this premise sounds really fantastic. Again, we've got a time loop story. So the main character, the titled character is named Harry August, and he is able to basically go through this time loop as well. Now, it sounds like he belongs to a group of people called the Kalachakra, who are people who are able to relive their entire lives before they die. Now, the rule this group has, because I guess these people who can do this band together and form some sort of club. What a cool club. That the rule that they have is you cannot go back and interfere with history. So that's one of the things, for example, the Stephen King book is doing, right? He's actually trying, Jake Epping, the character in that story, is trying to change history. And he does, in various ways, change history along the way. And there are ripple effects to that. So I'm always fascinated by the idea, when you change something, what are the ripples? We think we are solving a big problem, but I don't think we necessarily know all the interconnecting webs that get rippled out and change, and maybe worse things are around the horizon or over the horizon. So in this particular case, the 15 Lives of Harry August, this group, their rule is only one, that they do not change history, and yet there is this character that decides he's going to do so. And so the character, Harry, his job then is to try and identify who that person is and stop him from making that or doing what he's threatening to do. Sounds really great. I'm a fan of Claire North. I'd be curious what you thought about this one if you've read it. And finally, what I have is, it's a book called All You Need to Kill by Hiroshi. I think his name is Sakurazaka. This is a Japanese book, and it's translated by Alexander O. Smith. Now, I'm really intrigued by this one as well, because this was adapted into the movie Edge of Tomorrow, the one with Tom Cruise, where aliens have invaded and basically he keeps dying and then reliving that same day over again in battle. So I really loved that movie. I love the idea of that movie and the themes it explores. And so I guess this is the first time I did not know that was based on a book. So I plan on reading this particular book. And the other thing I noticed when I was doing a quick search on this author and this book is that there's also a manga series. Now, this is unusual in Japanese literature in this kind of storytelling, and that it's a prose book as opposed to manga, even though it has also been adapted into a manga series that I'm going to be checking out. So those are the 5 books I have to talk about today. They all have time loops. If you have read any of these, I would be really curious as to your feedback, whether you like them or did not like them. Of the 3 I mentioned that I have not read, if there's one that you really loved and you want me to move further up my TBR, do let me know. If you are a fan of time loops, without necessarily getting caught up in all the science of how that's happening, sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. So if you're a fan of time loops, give me a like down below so I know that I'm not alone. And until I talk to you next time, happy reading. Bye.